This broadcast of the Competizione Performance League GT4 Pro-Am Cup America Series is brought to you by Malwar Transport and Assure Action Transport Expert. For oversized cargo and trucking logistics specialists of Quebec, visit www.malwar-transport.ca. And for an expert and professional trucking insurance firm specializing in property and casualty insurance solutions for freight across Quebec, Canada, and the United States, visit www.transportexpert.com. Good evening, ladies and gents, and welcome back to TRTM for tonight's coverage of the final stop of Season 2 of the Competizione Performance League GT4 Pro-Am Cup America Series. As always, I am Regan Clark. You join us here after last week crowned Christian Lebay as Season 2's champion after a fiery exit to the British chapter in Snetterton. You find us here at the home of American motor racing, right here in a bastion of American motoring history, right here at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. The second ever dedicated motor racing course in motorsports history, founded in 1909, 2 years after the Brooklyn Circuit in 1907. It is 15 turns and 2.5 miles of FIA Grade 1 with a mixture of FIA Grade 2 in this particularly bizarre configuration used by the GT World Challenge America Series, leveraging parts of the Formula 1 United States Grand Prix layout as well as the infield road course layout used in IndyCar. Of course, speaking of IndyCar, the most popular orientation of the track we find is the Brickyard layout that gave us one of three of motorsports' most iconic events, the Indianapolis 500, what makes up part of the motorsports Triple Crown alongside the 24 Hours of Le Mans and the Monaco Grand Prix. Indianapolis is absolutely iconic no matter which angle you look at from the world of motorsports. And outside of just the Indy 500, it also hosts a smaller race in the IndyCar series known as the Soncio Grand Prix that runs on the infield course. NASCAR operates out of here with the Brickyard 400 in the Cup Series and Pennzoil 250 in the former Xfinity, now O'Reilly's Auto Parts series. The IMSA Sports Car Championship introduced the Battle of the Bricks in 2014 here in Indianapolis, reviving it from 2023 onwards. And of course, the GT World Challenge America Series ran here as well, and also saw all shapes and sizes of racing throughout its over century-long tenure in the motorsport's eye, through some of the most significant events in world history, through 2 world wars, multiple economic recessions. One thing is for certain, Indianapolis still stands. And today, it's the home of the final round of the championship. Of course, as mentioned before, reeling away from what was a fantastic doubleheader here in Snetterton, we come back to America at the very end of this championship to find ourselves back on to this standard format, away from the double sprint races, back on to 60 minutes of racing set to follow. Taking a look then into the regulations coming into today's event. Of course, we're in the midst of 20 minutes of free practice, 20 minutes of qualifying to follow, and 60 minutes of racing with a single mandatory pit stop for both fuel and tyres. It's going to be quite an exciting end to what has been a fantastic chapter once again for this one on screen here. Christian Lebay was crowned champion in Snetterton last week. We were getting a chat with him as well as several other drivers on the upcoming interview panel after today's race. That includes drivers like Kevin Quain, Dylan Vecchiere and Richard Cecil on the panel for Season 2's drivers' interviews. We had a chat with a few other drivers last season. Among them was Byron Forrest, when we spoke about his move over to Aston Martin. Well, taking a look around the track to see whereabouts Forrest may be in this round today. Taking a look, he's currently residing from the pit lane with a few other drivers with 15 minutes left to go in the midst of free practice. Taking a look then onto the session timing charts, we find ourselves looking right now at the only time on the chart of 1:43.585 by Christian Lebay. Before we get on to the topic of the qualifying predictions in about a quarter of an hour's time, let's get on to the subject of quite a few different topics of discussion. First of all, the championship standings, and with the championship wrapped up for Lebay, he finds himself leading this fray into the final stop with 453 points to his name, ahead of David Tanguay in second place, Vincent Simard third, with Giovanni Badiali in fourth, Kevin Quain up to fifth since round 7's doubleheader, and then with in sixth place at this time Timo de Tosto off by 4 points, Richard Cecil off by 10 points to sixth place, currently seventh and ahead of Graham Green with 221 points. He's ahead of fellow Australian talent Clinton Bourne in ninth place with 218 points, rounding out the top 10, and having made his way in right at the very last stop of the championship is up-and-coming Season 2 talent Dylan Vecchiere, who we're getting on to chat with later on today. Speaking of some of the drivers we'll be speaking with later on, Richard Cecil second into the timing charts, 1.225 seconds from the fastest time, second onto the charts both in terms of available times and in terms of the fastest time so far. We also see onto the charts from behind him Stephen Black in the 707 Mercedes. Reeling away from the topic of the championship standings, we also see the previous wins, and we can see it has been a two-horse race when it comes to race wins for the entirety of the season. Lebay v Badiali, the main subject of Season 2's race-winning itinerary. Off of that trail then, we get to balance of performance. We find here currently McLaren best in class with a 14 kilo reduction expected for the 570S. That's fantastic news then for Timo de Tosto and Ivan Sanchez, both of which driving the 570S in today's round of the championship. Chevrolet, the dominant manufacturer of the season, find themselves once again in benefit with 8 kilos on for the Camaro GT4R. That's equal instead with BMW. So if he's on this grid today, it doesn't appear that he is at the moment, but were he on this grid, Sean Cox, one of the only drivers to take to the helm of the BMW this season alone, would have been seeing the same level of benefit. Mercedes a single kilo behind them, 7 kilos off of the AMG GT4, one of the more popular cars of the season. Speaking of their sister car, the Aston Martin V8 Vantage, we now see second onto the charts goes Dylan Vekere, and he, as well as several other Astons in this round, will be losing 5 kilos. Then into the positive discussion, the only manufacturer to speak of being Porsche. But we seem to find ourselves right at the very last stop of the championship without a single 718 to speak of on today's grid. Meaning the last car to not be front-engine machinery resides solely in the court of McLaren. We see here for Timo de Tosto down through to turns 13, 14 and 15, about to enter the timing charts with the 119 now peeling into the pits faster than any other car on track by 1.125 seconds. With Aston Martin lining up behind him, we do see that the chances are livelier than ever for Vekere to come and secure pole position here in Indianapolis. Down towards the line then goes Timo de Tosto in the 58 McLaren. Bear in mind, 14 kilos off of that car, and so it appears there was either an outlap or a lap where he could not secure a time onto the charts. In the meantime, Vekere now brings things to within a second, with Richard Cecil currently down towards turn 8. We'll be seeing his time possibly on the improvement by the end of this lap alone. Conditions on track looking rather amicable, 22 degrees on track. Surface temperature roughly 16 degrees in ambient. No imminent threat of rain either. It looks like nice, clean, dry racing for the final stop of the championship. What has been a phenomenal season. Getting a look at the road ahead, of course, early on in the discussion for today, before the end of free practice, is the look just briefly, and we'll pick back up on this towards the end of the race today, is that look of Season 3's calendar with Brands Hatch, the first round of the championship, coming up just next week. So very quick into the proceedings, and we're also going to be talking a little later on in free practice about the upcoming regulations. And again, like with this, we'll be bringing it back up after the race and after the interview panel. We can see here, though, this is the look of Season 3's calendar. Brands Hatch first round, then Imola, then Monza, Silverstone, Laguna Seca, Donington, Paul Ricard, Zandvoort, Bathurst. All of which featuring an inter-revolving session type, 60-minute standard racing like we're seeing here in Indianapolis today. A 2x30, which we saw last week in Snetterton, making up rounds 2, 5 and 8. And then the introduction of a brand new event type, the 90-minute Enduro, coming up at rounds 3, 6 and 9. So that'll be for Monza, Donington and Bathurst. We'll be very curious to see how all of that shapes up in towards Season 3. At the moment then, we see Richard Cecil in the last lap sadly couldn't secure any further hold of positions up the road, and we see that both he and Vekere have been pushed down towards that second row with the introduction of David Tanguay, of course the runner-up in this championship. David Tanguay has been an incredible talent on this field. We saw him break his way into the debut run over on the NLRL Sunday League to quite great starts that ultimately came to be a bit of a messy start at the hands of a three-way clash with both Lebay and Van Velzen. That doesn't disregard the kind of talent that Tanguay brings to the field. Quite the versatile talent indeed, from the number 30 Camaro to the number 30 Bentley. We see right now joining into the top 5 2 more Camaros, that being at this time Vincent Simard, now 4th fastest, and then behind him the 747 of Graham Green, now 5th fastest in the session. That forces a wedge down onto Aston Martin. Then backing up from behind them, we see into 8th place the Jackal, and then Cal Ford in 9th place. At the moment, only 2 manufacturers occupy all 10 positions of the top 10, that being Aston Martin and Chevrolet, head to head as the 2 manufacturers to be here in Season 2. It does definitely make things a bit of a curious case coming into Season 3 as to whether or not we'll be seeing much of the same out of Chevrolet, out of Aston Martin, or whether or not we could be seeing, as we've seen in the last couple of rounds, the rise of Mercedes-AMG once more to be the foil to these two manufacturers. Or could it be the case that another angle entirely worth exploring, and that being of McLaren, the number 58 we see here with Timo Tosto making his way back down towards turns 14 and 15, but into the pit lane peels the number 58. Oh, looking to check on board then with a 484 down to the line. Cal Ford from 9th on the field, up to 7th then, ahead of Didier Potvin in the number 35. Before we get on towards qualifying as well, there's also word from Race Control, taking a look into some of the rulings in the last couple of days. Does give two cars qualifying bans for this round, Clinton Bourne and Sean Cox. The number 74, though, presently not appearing on this grid at all, so it will just be the number 6 seeing any kind of detriment in today. You can see for Clinton Bourne, he's resided in the pit lane. He's not looking to waste any time out on track at this length in free practice before we get on towards qualifying, which he won't be able to play a part in. We'll be starting, by looks of it here, 21st on this grid later on today. So then with 7 minutes left to go, let's go and catch on board here with the driver down towards the line. We see here, this is with Dylan Vekere. Starting this sort of unofficial tour of things through this very bizarre configuration of the Indianapolis, I should say, Motor Speedway. We begin down in the very same section that presided over the Formula One United States Grand Prix in the early 2000s. With Sector 1. Featuring this sort of stair-shaped opening sector section in through to turn 4, now down toward turn 5. The loop's back in on itself. Instead of taking the chicane to the left, we come down into this open hairpin along the right, and that curves back round to the left here at turn 6. Hooks back in on a very sharp right-hander, but opens past the apex to reveal the run onto the back straight out of turn 7. So this is going to be a major attacking spot, as we've seen in a few other championships to have visited Indianapolis here on Assetto Corsa. And down towards turn 8 we go, heavy braking zone into a sharp square left on the run into another staggered section here. Through turn 9, then to turn 10, up through to turn 11. Then we have a very short straightaway after turn 11. You can see here, very short straightaway before we're into turn 12. This is where we start to join back up with the Brickyard layout. Through to turn 13, 14 now coming up. In towards turn 15, you'll see coming up down towards the line that original yard of bricks when the circuit was first constructed. Down across the line goes Vekere then. Across the line, second fastest in the session, 1:43.510 in that last lap from the 161, our unofficial tour guide of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway here in round 8 of the championship. From behind him, the number 824, Byron Forrest, fourth fastest, so now staggers the order between Chevrolet and Aston Martin here in free practice. It does leave a very hopeful sign for Aston Martin coming up into qualifying later on today. We'll get onto those discussions when we break into 20 minutes of quali just a moment from now. In the meantime, still hard luck for Mercedes, 12th, 13th, 14th and 15th at this time. The Hail Mary solution of the Mercedes lineup was set to be Kevin Quain, but we can see completely absent from action in the pit lane at this time. Currently the only Mercedes car of one of two, actually, sorry, I should say, out on track being the 96 of Casey Miles. The other, so it appears there, Christophe Dupois in the number 39. Nearest to the line, the number 24, Chili Peppers from 9th, looking to displace Cal Ford from 8th place, and that he does by 0.005 of a second. Now, when you consider the gap between Richard Cecil, Chili Peppers and Cal Ford, 7th, 8th and 9th respectively on the timing charts thus far, you're talking a factor of 0.45 of a second. So things are razor thin, even in the last free practice, and then we'll have a look later on to see that that is much the same story for the last qualifying predictions of the season. We'll see whether or not that materializes though as razor thin standings at the final qualifying of Season 2. before we get in towards Season 3 later down the line. We see here, emerging from behind is the 5th place number 120. That's Vincent Simard on his way through to turn 7. With 3.5 minutes left to go then, things starting to wrap up in free practice. Nearest to the line, the 824. Byron Forrest from 4th on the field does find an improvement. Needs roughly there by looks of it, 35 thousandths of a second to Tanguay. So things are very likely to see Aston Martin up towards the front of that second row. Now, is it a question the number 30 may have potentially been sandbagging or has just not had the performance he'd like in the last couple of laps? Well, we're about to see whether or not that is the case, as heading down towards the line comes the number 30 of David Tanguay. And across the line he goes to no improvement. So it is looking to be a compelling sign. Aston Martin stands to challenge Chevrolet at the last stop of Season 2. From behind him, we see down towards the line the number 58. That being Timo de Tosto, still 6.1 seconds off the mark and 17th in the session so far. Now, something is very curious indeed about the 58 at this time. Of course, we've seen him to have decent performances in the last couple of rounds. He's been a real trooper on the grid. Snetterton proved that much to be true. It does beg the question here. Are we perhaps seeing a little bit of tactical sandbagging from McLaren, keeping expectations low, of course, bringing back up that discussion of balance of performance as we stay on board here with the McLaren number 58 of Timo de Tosto. It's worth noting McLaren find themselves best in class by not a small margin here. We are talking quite a decently large margin. This is about 6 kilos over the nearest car, being Chevrolet or BMW, respectively. 14 kilos shed away from the 570S is definitely going to make it a bit more fleet of foot here. So it does beg the question of why is their pace so abnormally off? Is it a case like we just saw there on the run through turn 9 that something is not 100% awry here? Not 100%, not 100% awry, 100% clear here about McLaren's available pace, or is it a case that they are sandbagging? I think as we saw over through turn 8 and turn 9, he is cutting the corner. So is it a case where maybe track limits are not adding up in the favour of Timo de Tosto? We have seen this to be a case before in the season. Drivers were having continued troubles with track limits on a few different circuits. You see here, heading down through turn 15 to the line, number 58. Now this is likely to be invalid. We'll see across the line though if that's the case. And there we can see proof meets the ground here, as there goes McLaren up to 3rd. A little bit staggered by what I saw there, because I really would have had it in the back of our minds looking through that sector 3 run with such a disregard almost to the white lines. We would have thought that would have been an invalid lap, but yeah, it was definitely the case that McLaren was sandbagging, because now we see in the trailing end of free practice the veil be lifted off the 58 and now is very much so in the topic of fighting for the lead later on in today's race. It could very well be a three-way split here. Of course, defending a near perfect record this season, Christian Lebay on all of but 2 occasions this season has not seen any competition take the mantle away from him. It has been undisputed control of the field. Started things off on a 5-in-a-row tenure from round 1 to the second half of round 3 in the 2 double sprints that followed. It was only until round 4 at the Hungaroring that Giovanni Badiali could challenge Lebay for the lead of the race. Then it was back to business for round 5. Badiali back on top again at round 6's first of 2 races, and then from that point onwards back to a hat-trick of victories before today for Christian Lebay. Could it be 4 in a row by the end of the season? One does beg the question to find out. Well, at the end of free practice, a few more drivers still out on track, among them the number 30. Bear in mind now only 25 thousandths of a second off of that 3rd place, so really not too far away at all from Timo de Tosto. Can he reclaim 3rd across the line? Sadly, not this time around. Nearest to the line at this time appears to be the 233 Wishful Winnings, a driver we saw up on a bit of a bizarre set of circumstances towards the end of his time in Snetterton, up over 2 wheels, riding along his door towards the tyre wall upon the exit of Brundle and Nelson. You see here for the 233 playing around with his Camaro, getting a bit of a drift in here. Now, we have seen this to be a case with a few of the drivers running in towards this round of the championship. They've been trying to drift the Camaro. Of course, a tail-happy car in its own respect, as we've just seen there, demonstrated from the 233. But I have seen some very interesting clips indeed of drivers getting some very clean, almost elegant slides in before the run of today. Now, I don't think we'll be seeing any of those over the course of the qualifying session to follow. It is worth noting that the drivers are so confident on this circuit, they're able to find not only racing lines, but drifting lines too. Well, on to 20 minutes of qualifying. Taking a look up towards the front of the field, we see a very quick draw of the gun there for the 58. Fastest hand on the grid. Timo de Tosto also benefiting from a very solid starting position on the pit row. Finds himself first among the fray out onto the field. So we'll stay on board with the number 58 McLaren as he gets released from the pits from behind him. The 824 of Byron Forrest and the 119 of Christian LeBay. So it appears to be the first three drivers out onto the track. Though it does appear there the 824 may have very well given over to the 119, as yes, we can now see the Camaro up into second place. So we'll stay on board with the McLaren as we get into the subject of qualifying predictions. Taking a look then through the data gathered over the course of the last 24 hours, it shows LeBay up at pole position and Vecchia only distant by 185 thousandths of a second. This is remarkably thin, and that trend only continues when you look further behind. Another 180 thousandths of a second is what distances Dylan Vecchia from Clinton Bourne in third place. From behind him, we see things open up just a little bit there to just shy of 0.6 of a second in between himself and Cal Ford in fourth place. Vincent Simard in fifth with Timo de Tosto in sixth. Separate from seventh place being Chili Peppers with Aston Martin by 0.05 of a second. Now, when you consider even further down, Richard Cecil in eighth place in these predictions, front to back, sixth through eighth, find themselves distanced by 73 thousandths of a second. So very, very thin margins to play with in the trailing end of the top 10 in predictions today. Wish for Winnings predicted at 9th and Byron Forrest predicted in 10th place. So for De Tosto, his chances of a top 3 row start are absolutely on the table here. As we saw towards the end of free practice, there is absolutely the chance therein to start upon the podium, up on that second row of the field. We'll see, though, how that chooses to materialise over the course of this session. 20 minutes of qualifying underway at this time. We've already burned through nearly 3 minutes of that just getting onto the first flying laps of today. We see that the grid has spread out a little bit for the proceedings in towards the first flying lap. So now we see that the current running order appears to be the 58, the 119, the 30, the 824 and the 5 as our first 5 drivers onto the timing charts. From behind them, the 120, the 747, the 233 and the 91. So as that stands, that would be, if I remember correctly here, Timo de Tosto, Christian LeBay, David Tanguay, Byron Forrest, Richard Cecil, Vincent Simard, Graham Green, Wishful Winnings and Ivan Sanchez. So that is currently your first swarm of drivers, as it were, as we see down through to turn 6 goes De Tosto, already on a spry start here with McLaren, with every chance to challenge for pole position today. We saw in the trailing end of it has now put McLaren in the topic of the big 3 on today's qualifying, alongside Chevrolet, who have dominated the season, and Aston Martin, who have played as their nemesis throughout season 2. In through to Sector 3 then, an area where we've already been able to see De Tosto is not afraid to get his elbows out when it comes to the conversation of track limits. He's found the line through there. Has got the manoeuvrability to boot. Basic physics aiding his side here with the fact he's the only mid-engine car of this grid, besides, of course, Sanchez sharing the same platform with McLaren. But from the looks of it here, surrounded upon all sides by front-engine machinery. In the corners, he'll be unparalleled, but in the straightaways is where that McLaren does run some vulnerable tendencies out. Of course, on the original ratio gearbox, it does leave things a little bit worrisome up against Chevrolet with a little bit more oomph underneath. We see LeBay now fastest, with De Tosto momentarily fastest in the session. Now that's down to third as Tanguay goes fastest. Then to the line comes Byron Forrest. From behind him, Richard Cecil in the number 5, then the 120. We see there Chevrolet 123 right off the bat. The number 747 coming to the line. That being Graham Green, but has found himself in between the 2 Aston Martins. Then across the line goes Sanchez, 8th fastest. Wishful Winnings from behind, so it appears, didn't put a time onto the charts. The 161. Vecchia, 2nd fastest for Aston Martin by 58 thousandths of a second. So off to a Very strong start indeed. The 6:07 across the line to start flying laps. That's Kevin Quain with Mercedes AMG. The 24 across the line. Chili Peppers 9th fastest for Aston Martin from behind him. We see across the line the 35. Didier Potvin slots in behind for 10th place. Then coming to the line here, we see Christophe Dupois. Number 39 across the line he goes. And joins us there from 12th on the field. The number 616, Andrew Veldkamp, pushes him down to 13th. With Veldkamp now 12th. Stephen Black, we can see in the background there, approaching the line in the 707. And so it appears there is to start a new flying lap. The 999 across the line. The Jackal in the gold-clad Camaro, 11th fastest. Then we see approaching the line from behind him, Cal Ford in the number 484. 10th fastest there. From behind him, we see Brandon Carr, 13th fastest for Mercedes. Then approaching the line, I believe that to be Casey Malles. Across the line, 17th there. De Tosto immediately back into the fray. Bear in mind, only 385 thousandths off of the 119 across the line from behind. LeBay now fastest in the session. The number 30. What's the rebuttal here by David Tanguay? As now the line has been towed up by 3/4 of a second, just shy there actually, 725 thousandths precisely. Vecare still 3rd fastest. Forrest, as it stands right now, 4th. Across the line a moment ago, Richard Cecil 8th in this session. 120 being Vincent Simard, 5th so far, with the 747 of Graham Green still maintaining posture in the top 10. 7th so far. We see for De Tosto, this is right on schedule here, predicted at 6th place. And I just got word from Wishful Winnings in the 233, was part of that timing order in the start of qualifying, that there has been a sizable rollover for the 233, and it seems somewhat of a cursed car now. We saw the issues creep up on him in SNET, and now looking here in Indianapolis, what is arguably one of the flattest tracks in circulation here when you don't consider the Brickyard layout, giving us a bit of banking just out through to turn 13, 14 and 15. It has been quite a bizarre thing then to see anyone be able to roll that car, but as we see here, Chevrolet is the manufacturer to be when it comes to that. Now, that's not to say that it's entirely on Chevrolet to be the only manufacturer that can roll. This was, I believe here, if we still have the footage, yes, this was from Carson Claus with Porsche. This was back in the Hungaroring a few rounds ago. So, as it turns out, it is somewhat of a universal issue for the GT4s to be a little bit on the top heavier side. We've just seen it to be more often than not Chevrolet, but that's not to say it's impossible for any other manufacturer to be able to do the same. The number 30 across the line a moment ago, still 2nd fastest. Byron Forrest across the line, still 4th. We see across the line here goes Richard Cecil from 9th. Back up to 8th place there, displaces Green down to 9th place. The 120 still in 5th. The 747 across the line. Can he retake 8th place? Not on that last run, just gone. Those two separate by 7 thousandths of a second in contention for 8th place. 91 nearest to the line, Ivan Sanchez from 15th on the field. Can he go up and ahead of the two Mercedes cars? Yes, he can, and he takes an Aston Martin with him. Now up to 12th place ahead of Potvin, Carr and Dupois. We saw there, though, the 607 creeping up fast. There comes Kevin Quain, a driver we've seen to be a serious challenger in qualifying, but it's been a bit of a slower start for Mercedes in this round of the championship. You would have considered, with BOP on their side, not to be one of the manufacturers gaining weight coming into this round. They would have seen at least some modicum of an advantage compared to Chevrolet and Aston Martin, yet they seem to find themselves empty-handed in that department, with McLaren taking up the slack as the new third party. 999 nearest to the line, so that'll be for the Jackal at this time. 11th fastest, tucked in behind Graham Green. We see in the background there that bright turquoise and green 888 coming to the line. That's Brandon Carr up to 11th from 15th, an improvement by 4 positions in that last run, getting closer and closer to the 5th row just as we cross into the halfway mark of the session. 96 across the line a moment ago, that was Casey Malles, still 18th in the session here. The number 30 coming to the line. David Tanguay does toe the gap in just a little bit further, and we now see Byron Forrest move up to the fastest slot of Aston Martin so far, up to 3rd. And only distant there from Tanguay's front row position by the looks of it there, by 37 thousandths of a second. So things are still very, very thin up in the margins here. It's easy to look at them very differently when, of course, you're dealing with 643 thousandths between the leading pair. Often it's been the case throughout the season. We've noticed, of course, the big gaps really do tend to be for LeBay versus anyone else to find themselves alongside him in that front row. But then when you take a look past, this isn't so clear as to be, you know, almost a qualifying turkey shoot here for LeBay. It is constant challenge, as we see now creeping back into fray comes McLaren, courtesy of Timo de Tosto, now bringing the line much closer in than where it was by 0.6 to now under 0.2. So when you get a look at the relative gaps between the rest of the field, you see just how razor thin things have been all season long. Today being no exemption here in Indianapolis. You see for the two Aston Martins here, 8th and 9th, this is an example, Chili Peppers and Richard Cecil. These two separate by just under 1/10 of a second. In fact, I believe that to be 98 thousandths of a second between those two. So very, very close at hand between Peppers and Cecil, and that's just one example. Of course, there's even closer gaps we've observed here. We see one among them, that's Potvin v Carr, and that's by 5 thousandths on today's grid. Across the line goes the 161, Dylan Vekere. Can't find his way up and ahead of Byron Forrest. Bear in mind, Vekere just pushed down to the 3rd row. Will be trailing behind Tanguay and LeBay for positioning on track in front of him, but of course will start alongside that of Byron Forrest, Timo de Tosto and Vincent Simard. Speaking of de Tosto, we see him here, tucked in behind the 24, so it appears. That's Chili Peppers in front with Aston Martin. These two heading down through turn 15. Onto the opening straight. Across the line then goes Peppers, 8th fastest, and remains there. Still just about 98 thousandths away from Richard Cecil. In 9th place, still secures a spot on that 4th row. But Timo de Tosto, he's definitely started punching up here. Where he was only expected for 6th place, he has done more than enough in this time. With just under 8 minutes left to go, there is still the chances for him to continue to fight forth in towards a leading position in qualifying. 198 thousandths is all that divides him from LeBay, but as we see, the 119 still actively out on track, still hunting down an improvement over his personal and current session best 142.767. Up in front of him, we see a few drivers down towards the line, among them the 999. The Jackal sizing up a chance into the top 10. He goes, but across the line remains in 13th place. As for the 119, is there an improvement to be found in that last lap? Sadly, not this time around. We see for Vekere from behind, again stifling in his chances to get closer to Byron Forrest. These two separate as it stands by 103 thousandths of a second. Nearest to the line, the 747, Graham Green at the back of the top 10 at the moment. On a top 10 that was previously secured entirely by Chevrolet, and Aston Martin has recently seen somewhat of an interloper in the form of the McLaren 570S, namely the number 58 of Timo de Tosto in 2nd place. We see Green down towards the line then, only 7 thousandths away from Cecil. Couldn't find anything though in the last lap. We see Caliber 084 in chat saying, and de Tosto said he was struggling in the Discord server. So yeah, perhaps this was a little bit of mind games played out by the 58, or something changed in the time since where he's been able to extract more performance than he thought he had coming in towards today's session. Either theory is plausible unless instructed otherwise. I'd like to think it was the former, where he's done a little bit of mind games here, trying to keep everyone in the dark, sort of how Mercedes were doing sort of in their prime in Formula 1, keeping everyone on their toes that, oh, the car's maybe not feeling so great, and then they come through and set track records. But in the case here of McLaren, this is one of their strongest qualifying performances of the season so far, and for de Tosto, things could be very, very lively for him on that race start, starting alongside LeBay as it stands right now, with just under 6 minutes left to go. He's got himself in a very powerful position for the hour of racing to follow. We've seen as well de Tosto's strategies have been very solid over the course of the season, so he does stand pretty sizable chance here to compete right at the last round for a possible first race win in his GT4 Pro-Am Cup America Series career. So we see the 58 heading back out on track. We'll catch on with him just a little later on. We go next on board once again back in with Graham Green. Now having recently been pushed out of the proceedings of the top 10. I believe that to be the case due to the imminent arrival into the top 10 by Wishful Winnings. The 233 now up to 8th, tucked in behind Cal Ford and Vincent Simard to make threes company from 6th through to 8th for Chevrolet. You see though the 747 heading to the line needs 7 thousandths, mind you, to be back into the top 10. And that's the line currently towed in between himself and Richard Cecil. Couldn't find even a single thousandth on that, showing how close the gaps are getting for the majority of the grid today. As for the 24, trying to reel in now the chances to catch 8th place. Chili Peppers opening the taps up over Cecil. You see recent shift of position there from behind. Vincent Simard now pushes Byron Forrest and Dylan Vecchiere down to that 3rd row. Aston Martin relegated from the first 2 rows of the field so far. Simard 3rd fastest and ahead of Tanguay. 233 nearest to the line. A driver we've seen before in broadly different situation. We find Wishful Winnings though having a whale of a time then with Chevrolet down in GT4. This may have been the golden recipe he'd been searching for some time. Last time we saw him was in his time in VSR driving the Ferrari 296. This is a broadly different vehicle, of course, to that. It seems to have fit him like a glove. 8th in the session so far. Meanwhile, for Aston Martin's progress in qualifying, Vecchiere back up into the top 5. And with a vengeance here too, now pushing himself up to 4th, displacing Tanguay to 5th place. You see immediate refresh and resolve there from the 161 into the pits. Brand new tyres and on his way back out. Not wasting any time here. Getting dangerously close to that point of no return. As it stands though, he'll have possibly 2 more laps to play with before the end of qualifying today. 747 still hunting down a top 10 chance here. Is it to be this time around for Green? Not this time. Bear in mind, you can still get in and then out of the pits if he plays his cards right here. From behind him, we see approaching the line, Chili Peppers from 9th. Nothing to have been found that last time around. The number 39 across the line a moment ago. That was Christophe Dupois, 18th in the session. Then from behind him, the 607 of Kevin Quain. Mercedes still yet to have found a foothold inside of the top 10. We see Richard Cecil across the line a moment ago. Couldn't find an extension over his personal best to try and open that gap up ahead of Graham Green in 11th place. Number 35 from behind him. See that to have been Didier Potvin, 12th place in the session so far, looking to reunite with his tenure of Aston Martin's ahead from 9th and 10th. Needs to find 0.07 of a second to reunite to make threes company of Aston Martin's just in and then out of the top 10. 233 nearest to the line. You also see down to the line here. Here comes David Tanguay. And up to 3rd fastest. So goes up and ahead of Vecchiere and then up and ahead of his teammate Vincent Simard at Maloir Racing. The 2 Chevys clashing heads here for that 2nd row spot. Just under 2 minutes left to go. Getting close now to the point of no return. We see here for Timo de Tosto, of course, was an immediate refresh and resolve to get himself back out on track. Same story was for that of the 161, Dylan Vecchiere. Down across the line, De Tosto couldn't find a single thousandth in on that fastest so far. Still finds himself controlling the pace at the front of the field. Number 24 coming to the line. We see for Chili Peppers with Aston Martin. Across the line he goes. Stays 9th in the session. That could very well be the end of his endeavours in qualifying. 39 to the line, Christophe Dupois. Then the 607 of Kevin Quain. Down across the line, Quain up to 13th with 1 more lap to play for. Then behind him, we see here Richard Cecil from 10th on the field. Currently stays in 10th. From behind him, the 161 of Vecchiere. And from behind him, the number 35 of Potvin. And for this one in particular, a lot of heavy expectation in this qualifying session for Vecchiere. Of course, those qualifying predictions had him pitched over the front row. At this time, though, finds himself scraping at the back of its top 5. You see here, big step out through to turn 4. That could very well have sealed his fate in the hopes of further advance in qualifying today. Number 30 to the line. Here comes David Tanguay. Across the line he goes. Onto one more flying lap, bear in mind. But still, progress is slowing to get up towards that front row to relegate McLaren from their chances to fight alongside the 119 Chevrolet at the start of today's race. We'll see whether or not that comes to be the case at the end of this session. We see down towards the line comes Timo Tosto. As it stands then, doesn't appear to be an improvement, off by 4/10 as he hits the brickyard here. Nonetheless, resides to a second place start in what has been a fantastic qualifying session for the 58. So it appears then it's Christian Lepay, after taking not only his second consecutive GT4 Pro-Am Cup America Series Championship last round in Snetterton, but also looks to round this season out with one last pole position before we get in towards Season 3. Coming to the line then, it's Kevin Quain from 13th on the field. And up to 8th there. Better late than never for Mercedes. Now intercepting a chance of a top 10 start. Makes his way to the 4th row. And approaching the line, the number 35 of Didier Potvin from 13th on the field. And hits the checkered line there at the brickyard for 13th. Presently, I believe there to be one more driver we're waiting on here. That being Wishful Winnings. 9th on the field so far. Hunting down his chances at an advance up to 8th place. Bear in mind, was just recently displaced by the introduction of the Mercedes right in the trailing end of qualifying today. A fantastic time laid in from the 6:07 AMG of Kevin Quain. Now up to 8th fastest. Only separate there, had there been a little longer in the session, could have made his way to 7th. Cal Ford's time was distant by 0.05 of a second. Looking on here then once again with Wishful Winnings. He's coming into the pit lane, so that brings about the end of the qualifying session here in the final stop of Season 2. And rounding out the last qualifying session of Season 2 is another pole position by Christian Lepay. But the major talking point has been that qualifying performance once again by McLaren's Timo Tosto. Starts upon the front row, then surrounded upon all sides by Chevrolet. This is set to be a very exciting final grid of the championship. We'll get into the readings of that in just a moment's time. We'll be back with you. Do just bear with us. So back with the grid just before the formation of the grid for the last time here in Season 2. Some of those major talking points right in the trailing end of qualifying. McLaren and Mercedes make a break into that top 10. Tosto 2nd, Quain 8th. We'll get on to the full proceedings of that in just a moment's time when we see the grid form up for the last time this season. Here at the heart of American motor racing at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. There we see the final grid form up about 3 minutes before the start of the formation lap. So getting through the grid order. Christian Lepay on one last pole position here for Season 2. And starting alongside him on an ecstatic qualifying performance, Timo Tosto with McLaren. An all-Chevy second row, I should say there, for David Tanguay and Vincent Simard, the number 30 and the 120, inseparable throughout the season. They find themselves 3rd and 4th. Dylan Vekere and Byron Forrest make an all Aston Martin 3rd row, 5th and 6th for Vekere and Forrest respectively. Cal Ford on one of his best qualifying performances so far in his first ever season here in the GT4 Pro-Am Cup America Series. The Australian 7th fastest and ahead of Kevin Quain, recently making breaks into the top 10 for Mercedes AMG right in the trailing end of qualifying here in round 8. Wishful Winnings, 9th place, with Chili Peppers in 10th. Richard Cecil, 11th, and Graham Green in 12th. Didier Potvin, 13th, and Brandon Carr in 14th. The Jackal, 15th, with Ivan Sanchez in 16th. And then on the 9th row, we see here Andrew Veldkamp and Christophe Dupois. On the 10th row, Casey Miles and Stephen Black. Clinton Bourne, of course, suffering that qualifying ban under race controls rulings for round 8, starts 21st at the back of this field, just onto the start of that 11th row. So it's going to raise many questions here, namely for McLaren. We know straight line speed is an advantage they possess, but they are much more situational in its deployment compared to Chevrolet. Looking back through the season, actually not too long ago, we were at the Circuit of the Americas on round 6 of the championship, where we got to see great use of the straight line speed by McLaren, as they're a lot more aimed at the top end of their gear tree. They still have much of the same gear ratio they had from when the car first rolled off the production floor at McLaren's factories in Woking, Surrey. But the 570S GT4 has a significant detune on its factory engine, bringing it in line with SRO's GT4 regulations. That means it's running on a lot of the same hardware as its road-going counterpart, the 570S, however with a significantly less amount of power. Of course, that doesn't scale up particularly well when your gears are geared up for more power than the car is currently giving out. It means that the McLaren has quite long gears by comparison to the rest of the field. Now, that's great for top-end speed, so long as you can find a straight line long enough to give you that advantage. So you'd be looking at the Mistral straight at Paul Ricard, or more relevantly, as we mentioned there, the back straight at the Circuit of the Americas. Conversely, Chevrolet are running a very, very close gear ratio by comparison on the Camaro, much closer to the road-going counterpart that it's based on there, the Camaro ZL1. Of course, much like the McLaren, is also somewhat of a detune, but this one is geared up just slightly better to handle that lack of power. Still using a Chevrolet engine at its core, an LT1 engine. The naturally aspirated unit. Actually, I will have to double check that. I'm pretty sure it's either the LT1 or the LT4. The story went with the Camaro GT4R. Yes, it's the LT1, so I was correct the first time. The LT4 engine is what the Camaro ZL1 shipped with. That's a supercharged unit, but SRO regulations forbid the use of superchargers. You either turbocharge or the car's naturally aspirated. So when Pratt Miller Engineering were given the contract to produce a GT4-oriented version of the Camaro, they had to get creative, sourcing that engine, the LT1, out of the Camaro SS. So then taking us away on the formation lap here with Christian Lebay. An hour of racing set to follow, just to remind you of the session itinerary. That's one mandatory pit stop as well for both fuel and tyres for the regs of today's race. 60 minutes to follow here in Indianapolis. Heading in through to turn 6. Now, this gives us a slowed down look at this area of the track where we do expect a lot of action to arise. On the run round this open hairpin left, then it sharpens up for a run round turn 7, and then opens up almost immediately onto this back straight here. Running in through Sector 3. This is where a lot of that fighting set to somewhat dissipate here as we go into single file. A little too narrow on that undulating section to give us anything worthy of side-by-side battling, though of course this grid has surprised us on a multitude of occasions to prove the impossible. So then heading down towards the line. That final look upon the front row on the final formation lap of Season 2. Lebay already Season 2's champion, as crowned in Snetterton. We'll get a chat with him and a few other drivers at the end of the season after today's race. But it's one last stop then for Season 2 of the Competizione Performance League GT4 Pro-Am Cup America Series, powered by Malwar Transport and Assure Action Transport Expert, and live exclusively here on TRTN every step of the way. Down towards the line then, at the heart of American motor racing, a track with over a century in the sport. Indianapolis is green and racing here for the last stop of Season 2. A great start from the front row, as to be expected. Making their way down towards turn 1, 2 and 3 for the first time. We see a great getaway by Chevrolet. McLaren struggling in the early game here down towards turn 1. So De Tosto holding things around the outside whilst the 119 seeks the racing line. We see here going around the outside in the opening sector, attempting his luck here early doors. That's for David Tanguay in the number 30. We see up and alongside now ahead of Timo De Tosto in the opening flurry. And that gives rise as well as we see further down the line for a few of the other Camaros on this grid. Trying to get a look in here with, if we can, the number 120 now having got up and ahead as well of the 58. We see now seeking a look up the inside, the 161, that magenta Aston Martin of Dylan Vecchiere. We see in the background there, very elbows out performance by Byron Forrest. Had a less than ideal start, now immediately fighting with Cal Ford for current control of 6th place on the field. We see things were a lot livelier in that midfield, a storm of steel making our way in towards turn 8. We see here for the Jackal as well, as looking at it there, that's Clinton Bourne just tucked in behind, heading down through to turn 8, but it's side-by-side action between the Jackal and Brandon Carr, the 999 and 888 going side by side in towards sector 3. They filter back out to single file, and then tucking in further behind them the number 6 of Clinton Bourne, already having made up nearly the scope of 7 positions from the race start there. Up 5 positions, started 21st, now up to 16th, heading in towards turns 13, 14 and 15. We see him getting very handsy there with the back end of the 888. Meanwhile, we see this fight going on at the moment, Cal Ford versus Byron Forrest. We do see as well, having snuck his way on through, we saw the start of that move. Now we see the trailing end of it for Richard Cecil, fighting with Ivan Sanchez and Graham Green. These two side by side. It's actually worth getting a look here from the driver's point of view. A very rarely used camera angle has actually showed us a better look at that McLaren surfing up alongside. That's Ivan Sanchez in the number 91 Holcianos Motorsports McLaren. Richard Cecil up the inside in towards turn 1. Then through to turns 2, 3 and 4. See the McLaren still hanging on tight. Meanwhile, seeing here for Timo De Tosto, now fighting with Kevin Quain, who also leveraged a fantastic race start, now up from 8th to 5th on today's field. I want to get a look in back down the line here with Byron Forrest, a driver who was in some fighting for some time with Cal Ford. We see now as a bit of argy-bargy between himself and Wishful Winnings upon the exit of turn 7, yes. So getting a look in there with these two as we now bring up the big display. It's just the easier way to navigate these cars. In through to turn 8 we go. We see much closer fighting on the back end of that top 10 as it stands there. Wishful Winnings 8th place ahead of Cal Ford and Chili Peppers. We're getting a look at the scope of things then after a very hectic opening flurry of laps. LeBay leads ahead of Tanguay and Simard on a Chevrolet 1, 2, 3. Timo De Tosto fights with Kevin Quain. McLaren versus Mercedes, the two interlopers to a primarily Aston and Chevrolet grid, now look to go head-to-head for control of 4th place. They make their way out through turn 15. Byron Forrest, previously having fought with Cal Ford, now secures 6th place ahead of Wishful Winnings, now fighting with the 484 in question. Cal Ford in 8th place with Chili Peppers 9th and Graham Green in 10th place. Richard Cecil in 11th. We saw his move up the inside on the 91, but he's yet to shake loose then the Holcianos Motorsports McLaren of Ivan Sanchez. Meanwhile, up the line, we see here side-by-side action as now the 233 falls in behind the 484 as Cal Ford looked to have re-secured 7th, but there we see immediate trouble in its contact between Cecil and Ford. Oh my goodness, yellow flags out down at sector 1. We saw what happened there for the number 484, went long on the brakes in towards turn 1. And there caught that tiny bit of grass. That's what spun the car almost fully around, and it was just a perfect T-bone from the number 5. Had nowhere to go there. Wouldn't necessarily attribute blame on either driver there. That was just wrong place, wrong time, an incident between the pair. Not much Cal Ford could have done there once he had got the tyres up on the grass. We see there it's already had some long-standing damage on stability for that car out through turn 6. See joining us in chat there, HCR Anthony and Brooke Donkin 17. Good evening to you two as well. You've joined us right in the midst of chaos here in the opening 5 minutes of the final round of Season 2 of the GT4 Pro-Am Cup America Series. As bedlam erupted between Cal Ford and Richard Cecil, an incident down at turn 1, 484 having spun around accidentally into the sights of the number 5 that ran out wide through turn 1, collided centre mass with the Chevrolet. We see here with the ongoing fight between Kevin Quain and Timo de Tosto, we see though, as things start to fall into pattern, the 607 bleeding time away from the number 58 up in front. Looking further down the line to close by fights, we see Sanchez v Green, one to consider at this time. 747 holding decent distance over the McLaren here. Number 91 of Ivan Sanchez heading down towards turn 1. A driver we've seen in the sort of big brother of the 570S, the 720S over in GT3, but now we get to see over the last couple of weeks and today included what he's been able to do with the smaller offering from McLaren. You see though, having fallen away from Green, has now presented ample challenge here for the Jackal, the 999, hunting down the 91 and has run through to turn 6. Question there and remains, can he leverage an advantage this early on in the race? It's already been quite a bit of action for this one in particular. Could there be the chances here of a stab into the top 10? We see heading down the back straight in towards turn 9. On with the Jackal at this time. Through to turn 8. This is in the fight for 10th place. We see there a lot of bounce over the rear suspension arm there of the 91 as he caught up over the curbs through turn 9 and 10. Now through turn 12. And a lot of the fighting continuing on past the top 10. This is the furthest up the order of the closest fights on track at this time. There will be that update. Of course, we see the 999 though going up and around the outside just before the apex of turn 13 through, turn 14, I should say, now through turn 15. Meanwhile, Cal Ford in the pit lane in the 484. We see there the damage incurred over that incident from before. You can see now repaired a very early pit stop for the 484, and he may very well emerge just out past this next swarm of cars. Also coming into the pits was the other half of that incident towards the start of this race, the number 5 of Richard Cecil, a driver we hope to speak with later on today. It may not have been a particularly grand start to his race, but he has still revelled in a fantastic season thus far with Aston Martin. Today perhaps not being the greatest of reminders of such. We see, looking back on him with this fight now, as Sanchez drops in behind Jackal, Potvin sizes up chances for 11th place, the number 35 in pursuits at this time, making his way up at around turn 6, turn 7. It's worth pointing out there is close fighting to be expected here up in that top 5. We do see getting closer and closer to the 120. Was a recent advance there from Timo de Tosto. We see though that's since fallen back out to a second. Meanwhile, Byron Forrest is gaining ground on Kevin Quain. So it's worth catching on board with these two here as their fight continues. On board with the Aston Martin Forrest, now pursuing Kevin Quain for a stab at the top 5. Two cars very closely matched, mind you. Same family of engines, the Mercedes M178 and M177. Heading in towards turn 6 we go then. We see here with Forrest getting more eager towards the inside. Now, this is not to take away from what's just happened up in front. The 120 now falling in behind the 58, a recent spur of troubles for Vincent Simard. Now, this could result in somewhat of a cascade effect here for the 120. Now, as he drops into the iron sights of the 607, that's going to egg him on to move forward and try and distance himself from the 824, knowing that the chances of a top 4 rest in his hands. That'll be 4 positions up from where he started this race so far, currently up 3 from 8th place to 5th. I wonder if Byron Forrest has anything to say about it. As it appears here from the American in the 824, he absolutely has word to say on it, making his way in towards the 3rd and final sector. We know already there's that risk from Chevrolet of rollovers, as demonstrated in the background. Admittedly, we didn't get the opportunity to see it. We just had word here from Dylan Vekere, actually. I think it was, yeah, it was quite a curious case as to why we didn't see the 161. It's such a shame I was disconnected, says Vekere. I felt so much pace with the Aston today, and it felt like I was robbed of a top 5 or even perhaps a podium. But nonetheless, we're still going to try and get in touch with Vekere as part of the interview panel at the end of today's race to get a word in with what has been one of the quickest rising talents in Competizione Performance League history over the course of this season. He's took competition by storm on a routine occasion. Now we get to see 2 veterans of it go head-to-head. Byron Forrest versus Kevin Crane up and around turn 6. Front to rear quarter. The Aston Martin dipping up onto the grass, looking for more aggressive exit upon turn 7. What can he gain here down the back straight? He's got slightly more momentum to carry. Tucks into the slipstream. Limited as it will be in terms of its effectiveness with how short this straight is. Heading in towards turn 8, anchoring his way to the inside, trying to throw a bit of a blinder at the 607, and that he does find trouble with. It was a bit of a cheeky move there, but Byron Forrest kept everything in the clear and narrow. And it was a case where he looked his way up the inside, and then the 607 ran out of ground. I'm still sort of piecing that situation together in my head there. And it's somewhat of a case. It's cheeky, but it's not like he lunged for the move. He just parked the car on the inside line, was still probably about a car's length out, and the 607 perhaps panicked there and ran itself off track. Nonetheless, he kept things in the clear and narrow. There's no contact. Moreover, it was easily about half a car's length, or half a car's width, I should say, between himself and the Mercedes. I think it was just a case where he's sort of spooked him a little bit there, and he's forced the 607 to split his attention away from, do I defend the inside, or do I get the car slowed down in time for the corner? Nonetheless, good move from the number 824. We see here Peppers v Winnings, number 24 against the 233. You see Wishful Winnings running out wide through turn 6. Now this opens up ample opportunity to explore a fight for 7th place for Chili Peppers. The exit of turn 7. He knows that Winnings is starting to maybe bleed a bit of that confidence after that incident. Very easy to make more mistakes thereafter. This is something that Peppers is going to have to keep close eye on whilst not trying to make any mistakes himself. It's a very slippery slope for drivers. Once you make one mistake, you focus too hard on avoiding it, you end up making another in a different fashion. The classic case in sim racing we've seen before. Will that be the case here, or is Wishful Winnings' resolve somewhat unshakable? We are also seeing, oh, hang on just a moment there, was taking a look at the map, but as we saw right in front of our eyes, the 233 running out wide. That's forced Peppers to play things a little bit more cautiously, and that's not done him many favours. You see now queuing up behind him for a fight of 8th is Graham Green, peeling away onto the opening straight. We still find ourselves with what is effectively a 3-car split for 7th on the field. Meanwhile, the 120 appears to be chasing now up to the 58 very, very close at hand. The 824 still up the road from the 607. We're watching here with Chili Peppers v Wishful Winnings v Graham Green. A three-way split here from 7th through to 9th, all in contention of that 7th place spot up through Sector 1, turns 1, 2, 3, and 4. On the Aston Martin trades for that grunt down in the low revs, it makes up for in just slightly better maneuverability over the Chevrolets, or at the very least slightly more predictable maneuverability. You see though, this track is just wide enough at most corners and just lenient enough in how wide it chooses to be. And the track limits therein for where the Chevrolets can really get quite gung-ho about it and keep the foot in the floor. We'll check in with these three in a moment's time. Taking a look though up towards this fight here, Timo de Tosto versus Vincent Simard. De Tosto, we saw in the background earlier on, secured his tenure of the podium once again, just past the first quarter of an hour. He still holds on to it, but only by just about 0.4 of a second between himself and Vincent Simard. Out through turn 15, you can see trying to use absolutely every inch of the track to his disposal, making his way onto lap 9 of this race. That gap opens up by 0.2 of a second. We see in the background there Byron Forrest, and then from behind him we see the 607 of Kevin Quain. Down towards turn 1, 2, 3, and 4, we see here for De Tosto v Simard. This is an area of the track the 58 is going to find a lot more comfort in compared to the 120. Maneuverability on his side. Better center of rotation from having the engine behind the driver compartment. Meanwhile, looking here, Peppers v Green. Now that topic at hand as the gap between Peppers and Winnings starts to dissolve. We see though that's not for a permanent. That's not for certain, I should say, really. As that big step out of oversteer from turn 4 has now kicked that open for the opportunity to once again fight for 7th. You see, though, things are a lot more active in the sense of that fight for 8th place. Graham Green all over the back end of Chili Peppers at this time, hounding for position over the number 24. In towards turn 8 we go. So coming up on the first 20 minutes of racing, we'll get once again in a moment's time a look at the current standings here in this race. Meanwhile, we do have a yellow flag out, and I believe that to be for the number 96. That is for, if memory serves correctly, that's for Casey Mal. So taking a look here, 96 does rejoin the field. I believe there was an incident between himself and the 707. Yes, you can see there damage for Stephen Black. We're back in the green flag conditions as we exit turn 7. These two Mercedes cars now pushed to the toward the back end of the field, not necessarily the back end though, as they're now 17th and 18th. You see, this is the point of view from Wishful Winnings' side of this fight, with the number 24 Chili Peppers and subsequently the 747 of Graham Green. Having a look up and around the field at this time. You see here some side-by-side action. Richard Cecil being lapped around by Didier Potvin. Then following behind him is Clinton Bourne. Very close there. Very, very nearly an incident between the pair. On the way up and around turn 4. Back on then with Chili Peppers, the man in the middle on this fight for 7th. See, still watching on with this fight between Chili Peppers and Wishful Winnings. We do have recent news surrounding the driver's interview panel. Sadly, we won't be getting a word out of Kevin Quain. He texted in to let us know of that change in circumstance much earlier on. A case where he's not available after the race for the interview. So a pity we won't be able to hear from him that time around. A driver who's had a very sizably strong season with Mercedes AMG, especially as we've seen today, has been a real trooper on this grid. Hopefully there's always another opportunity around the corner towards the end of season 3. Perhaps we'll see much later on down the line. That's going to be carrying over the next couple of months there. 9 rounds to follow from next week onwards. It's going to be the longest season so far of the GT4 Pro-Am Cup America Series, as we stay on board here with Chili Peppers versus Wishful Winnings versus Graham Green. A battle that's taken so many twists and turns. We'll stay on board with these three as we take a look around the rest of the field. LeBay leads ahead of Tanguay in second. De Tosto third, still fending off an advance by Simard in fourth. Things getting very, very close between the pair. It's actually possibly worth taking a look on board with these two for just a moment's time. You see there a bit of upset from Simard. Back on then with Peppers as we take a look around the rest of the field. Byron Forrest in 5th place with Kevin Quain in 6th. Wishful Winnings just up in front of Chili Peppers on our screens at the moment here in 7th. We're on board with the Aston Martin in 8th place. Behind them, you can see in that rearview mirror the bronze or perhaps copper coloured 747. We see though, by the looks of it there, was that peeling into the pit lane? Yes. It well, not intentionally, so it appears there for Wishful Winnings. He's now forced to make a decision. Do I cut back across the grass or come into the pit lane? Well, he's chosen to go back across the grass. Could that create some issues here? He's having to go high and around the outside was Veldkamp and Carr. Winnings rejoins, now 13th on the field. Forced into a really tough position there, as we just saw on board with the Chevrolet. Nonetheless, that promotes Peppers to 7th. Green now from behind him, chasing in 8th place. Jackal 9th, Sanchez 10th. Veldkamp in 11th, Carr in 12th. Wishful Winnings we just saw there, 13th place. Clinton Bourne in 14th on the field. Christophe Dupois 15th, Stephen Black 16th, Casey Miles 17th, Didier Potvin in 18th, Richard Cecil 19th, and Cal Ford in 20th. So getting a look on board now with the newly found fight inside of the podium, on board with Vincent Simard, chasing back down his chances of a podium here off of Timo de Tosto with McLaren. You see, looking up the inside and towards turn 13 and 14. Now through to turn 15, still finds himself tucked in behind. We're on board at the moment with Vincent Simard in the fight for 3rd place. Down the opening straight we go then. You can see firmly in the slipstream. Now the McLaren is no slouch, but it does take a lot longer to wind up compared to the Chevrolet. It's just able to hold his ground down towards turn 1. Holds centre mass of the road. Still holds that control over the 120 as we make our way around 1, 2 and 3. Up towards turn 4 though is where Simard, we can see there, dives back onto the racing line to give himself the run through turn 4. Meanwhile, it's hard defence here from Timo de Tosto in through to turn 5. Now down to turn 6, holds the inside, knowing that would be likely to be where the 120 would go for the inside. See here, these are two drivers very well aware of each other on track. Out through turn 7, having backed off to give himself the space and subsequently the run onto the back straight. We see Simard playing very tactically here. This is a much more of a chess, not checkers kind of fight. The unstoppable force meets the immovable object here, because Simard, we've seen to be a very hard attacker for positions. We've seen for De Tosto, he's been a really solid defender. So these two really caught in that battle of wits for 3rd. It's quite refreshing to see as well, where action often ends up becoming a little bit sporadic at times. It becomes almost quite surprising and sudden. We're seeing this one is a lot more methodical, surgically precise between these two, the 58 and the 120. You see, though, as it stands, having to open up the gap just a little bit further here by 0.6 of a second, drastically different to where we found ourselves in that last lap. That's the battle effectively on ice for the time being. We'll catch back on with them in a moment's time as we take another gander around the field. We continue to see here there are ongoing fights for positions further down the line. This is again for 7th place between Green and Peppers. What was once a 3-man fight, now only 2. Across the line, still faster of the 2, the Aston Martin. We see emerging from behind, though, is a newly found 3-car fight. Getting a look in here with the drivers in question. We see Didier Potvin is part of a very odd sort of parade of vehicles here. We have the Jackal up in front in 9th. Behind Potvin, we have Richard Cecil aiming at position here, 18th place off of the number 35. And from behind them, we have Ivan Sanchez 10th on the field. Very confusing stuff. Now, quickly getting a look back on board then between the 120 and the 58 as things are picked back up on the run in towards turn 8. So once again, on with the attacking angle of 2 here for Vincent Simard. Bear in mind, coming up on that halfway mark is where we're expected to see quite a few of those mandatory pit stops. We see looking up the inside in towards turn 13. Goes Vincent Simard, backs off of it, allows the 58 to run along around the outside. We see there, aiming at the pit lane, goes the 58. So Timo de Tosto in, Vincent Simard stays out, up into 3rd place he goes. The 58 into the pit lane. Those two revelled in a fantastic fight with every hopes that we can see that later on. Again, down the line in this race. Meanwhile, that promotes Byron Forrest up to 4th place for the time being as well. You see here for Wishful Winnings, while he may have been taken out of that fight for 7th, he has not lost his fighting spirit. Quickly regaining ground then over the 2 Mercedes cars not long ago. We saw him emerging behind. Also into the pit lane at this time goes the 999 of the Jackal with Chevrolet. You also see here, this is Stephen Black versus Casey Miles. Just outside of the top 15 here. Bear in mind, these two were caught up in that incident earlier on in today's race down at turn 6. They're still fighting things out through turn 12 into turn 13. Neither of them yet considering options for the pit lane. In the case of this one here, Andrew Veldkamp in the number 616, things could get a little bit dicey for him in the next couple of laps. You can see in the background that bright, vividly bright, I should say, as well, green glow of the number 6. That is Clinton Bourne, a man who started 9 positions down only 28 minutes ago, from 21st on the field, now 12th, and closing in on this 2-car fight currently at hand for 10th place between Brandon Carr and Andrew Veldkamp, with Veldkamp defending. Not only does he have a Mercedes parked on his rear bumper, he's also going to have 2's company with the arrival of Bourne not too long from now. Up in front, we can see a considerable plume of dust kicked up from the 233. As we see here for Veldkamp, forfeits that fight of 10th place for tactical gains. Now leaving Brandon Carr at the mercy of a rapidly approaching Clinton Bourne. This is going to be an exciting one to see, so let's go and catch on board with the Chevrolet. Meanwhile, we see Ivan Sanchez into the pit lane. Timo de Tosto, we saw in the pit lane much earlier, now joins up on that fight between Miles and Dupois. But let's go to catch on with Clinton Bourne. And as we catch him there, he's up and alongside Carr in towards turn 1, but runs things out wide, very nearly suffers the same fate as we saw earlier on for Cal Ford. That's Bourne up into 7th place. 4 seconds up the road from him is Wishful Winnings. Getting a look then into the halfway mark of this race. LeBay still leads, but we see here for the 119, we've caught him possibly just at the right time here. No, it appears stays out. He was very far over onto the right-hand side there, but I believe seeing here with the 30, that is just the scope of the racing line. But as for the number 30, he's coming into the pit lane. So LeBay first, Tanguay second, but into the pit lane goes the number 30. As for the 824, we see here for Byron Forrest following him in from third on the field. Chili Peppers currently fourth and ahead of Graham Green. The 24 and the 747 making their way down through to turn 13. Question is, much like the 30 and the 824, will we be expecting either of these two? Yes, for the 24, and so it appears as well there for the 747 as well. Both of them looking to come in as the same unit.
We are halfway through. Keep it up.
See there, very abrupt stop to the line. That could catch a few drivers out today. As for Wishful Winnings, he stays out. Clinton Bourne, after one phenomenal opening stint, 7th in the race thus far, up from 21st. We'll see where that lands after strategy plays its hand. The number 6 into the pit lane, his last pit stop, hopefully, of the season. From behind him, Brandon Carr. It's about to be payday for this one here. Timo de Tosto. David Tanguay rolling out of the pit lane. De Tosto not too far off his trails here. Now, I don't know if the chances are necessarily on the table for him to catch that Chevrolet. You can see it is a very long pit exit, so the chances are absolutely still there. He rounds turn 15. It's going into the pits. From around him there goes the number 39, Christophe Dupois. Tanguay just released out onto the track as the 58 creeps into frame with Forrest on his way out. The 58 will take position back over him, with Tanguay on schedule by looks of it there to make his way to second in this race. We see for LeBay coming into the pits, leaves Wishful Winnings presently with a dilemma here. Does he stay out long and go into the lead of this race temporarily, or does he come in around the same time here and size up his chances to emerge inside of the top 10 still, salvaging the incidents from earlier on in this race? We'll leave that decision with him and him alone. The 119 still in the pit lane at this time. Also in the pits is the number 39. It does leave a few drivers without a pit stop yet served. Among them we see here Stephen Black. As for Winnings, we do see he's chosen the option to come into the pit lane and see where he exits. Bear in mind, that could be upwards of a free position when considering the 707 as part of that equation as well. Just under 28 minutes left to go then here in Indianapolis and subsequently Season 2. Winnings into his pit slot with very little issues there for the 233. The 119 on its way out. Tanguay, it's worth noting, not too far away. We see the limiter line creeping up not too far from now. This is for the 119 of Christian LeBay, about to exit the pit lane. As we see there, he's released. He's on his way out. Out goes the 119. The number 30 coming down towards the line just a moment ago. Really not too far away whatsoever. That's for David Tanguay. Then further down the line, we see for Wishful Winnings, he's on his way out, but Timo de Tosto now up into third place for McLaren. And Vincent Simard, you see for Winnings, now down as 6th as Forrest goes up to 5th. You see for Stephen Black as well, the last driver to come into the pits does so with just over 26.5 minutes left to go. Now, in terms of fighting, there is some very close fighting to be had towards the back of the top 15. Veldkamp v Bourne v Carr. You see for the 233, Wishful Winnings given a stop-go 30-second penalty for speeding in the pit lane. So things have gone rather sour for him just upon the exit. We're watching here with Bourne, part of this 3-car fight for 12th as the two Mercedes go side by side. Veldkamp now up and ahead of Carr, down towards turn 1 we go. We'll stay on board with Bourne at this time as he parks himself right onto the rear bumper of Carr. This is all, bear in mind, in contention for by proxy that look of 12th place. He's shoved back a peg just down through turns 2 and 3, now through turn 4 and 5. Now what he'll be hoping on is these two Mercedes cars find a way to trip over one another, and give him a much easier run in to that look of 12th place. I believe he may have just found a gap in their defense, looking up the inside. Bear in mind, this is for 13th between himself and Carr. Up the inside goes Bourne. Now tucks up ahead of the Triple Eight. So now he's into that fight for 12th up ahead with Andrew Veldkamp. Trying to take the shallower of the line over the 616, and it is paying dividends for him here. As you can see, reeling in the 616. He's got him on the line. Let's see what Bourne can do. Is he looking for a move up the inside as early as turn 13? The simple answer being yes. The question is now, can he hold it? The answer falling in very quickly being no, as he falls back in behind over the 616. Nearly invites in Carr for an opportunity to fight back. Down through turn 1, 2, and 3 we go. And just to note this as well, in the background there, having slowly but surely reeled in the rest of these drivers, is that of Richard Cecil. Was in that early doors incident with Cal Ford earlier on in the race today. We see now a side-by-side action between Bourne and Veldkamp. This has since actually upgraded itself to the fight of 11th place, with the 233 now in the pit lane to serve their stop go out through turn 7. So again, this is worth noting for that of Richard Cecil. Was in that incident earlier on today, was waylaid from his chances of a solid result. And now that he's not only inside of the top 15, he also stands to be within his chances of 11th place. We see a big incident there for Bourne and Carr. Big trouble out through turn 8. Bourne falls out of that fight for 11th place, and this does give Richard Cecil the Deus Ex Machina he's been looking for in today's race. Looking to catch on board then with the Aston Martin number 5. Richard Cecil is firmly back into the fight of things on somewhat of a redemption drive today on his last in season 2. In the straightaways, though, it's leaving a lot to be desired from the Aston Martin. Now, it'll be a topic we bring up with him later on in our discussions post-race, but of course this is now his second season in proper and his first full season with Aston Martin. It was a very early doors decision when he first signed up with Alpine. He swiftly moved on and out of the A110 in favour of choices over at Aston Martin, and it seems to have been from that point onwards a decision worth making. We see here for the number 5, comfortable in his ways with Aston for the majority of the season. Now, there have been a few hiccups, as there's been for every driver on the grid. We've seen today, though, from Cecil, some real resolve in his drive, some iron in the veins here of that number 5. Just under 22 minutes left to go, still well within his chances to fight for 11th place. Bear in mind, though, approaching from behind very quickly, mind you, in 13th place is Clinton Bourne, a driver also looking for redemption in today's race, having been kicked away from his chances to qualify. He suffered a qualifying ban for round 8 under race controls rulings. We were about to cut away here. There is an ongoing fight we want to try and quickly take a look over on. That's for Byron Forrest with another driver at this time. I believe we might actually be lucky if we can scroll maybe 1, 2 there. So as it stands, that's just with wishful winning, so not for positions. We can stay on board then with Richard Cecil and Clinton Bourne. Let's see if we can go and get a look on with the attacking angle of 2 with the number 6. Bear in mind, with Andrew Velkamp starting to hemorrhage time here, this has now very much been brought back in once again for Bourne, the fight of 11th. As he looks up there, contact with Richard Cecil, knocks him out towards turn 4 and 5. Surely he can't hope to hold on to that position there. The number 6, I believe, staying in, oh, there, just behind to let the number 5 back through. Both of these drivers want a lot of the same things in this race here, but you can see the immediate regret on the number 6. That's what's led him to make that decision. It's a very small knock, but obviously mid-corner, it's enough to upset the balance off of the car, and that's what led the Aston Martin to do a four-wheel slide out through turn 4. Down through turn 15 then. This is where the Chevrolet has its best possible chance at an overtake here, and one done hopefully cleanly. It's Bourne now in the slipstream on the Aston, but whatever Cecil's been able to do setup-wise, there's a real stroke of genius from the Aston, but we see much earlier onto the brakes. That forces Bourne into a really uncomfortable pinch there, as he actually had to rub up and against the wall to keep himself from colliding again with the rear end of the Aston Martin. I don't think he was expecting Cecil to get earlier onto the brakes. That definitely did throw a bit of a wrench in his plans there. Through to turn 6. Bear in mind, it's tough for these two to battle given that increasing risk of desync. See, tucking back in on the racing line, letting the number 5 defend for itself. Now swinging back in onto the apex at turn 8, giving him the run he needs through turn 9, 10 and 11. But again, this area, single file, very difficult to make any significant ground. It's going to be the staging point for the run down towards turn 12 and 13. Over whether or not Bourne's got any chance of a leap up the inside. We can see the number 5 already motioning to defend, so Bourne stays on the racing line. In towards turn 13 we go. Lets the Aston Martin run himself out wide and swings in through. Textbook there from Clinton Bourne, but there is that chance for a fight back, and it's contact between the number 5 and the number 6 as action goes sour. Taking a look then on the replay. Had there been the follow through for it, that would have been undoubtedly one of the best moves of the race. Between the number 6 and the number 5. The number 5 looked up the inside, and there was contact between the pair, knocked the number 6 out wide and onto the pit entry road. He cut back since across the grass to stay on track. But Bourne down to 15th. A lot of that progress he's strived for over the course of this race now reset. 17 minutes left to go. As for wishful winnings, after having served his stop-go 30-second penalty, he now finds himself 18th on the field, tucked in behind Casey Miles in 17th, but up and ahead of Christophe Dupois in 19th. Taking a look then as we enter the final quarter hour of a race, we see here with Cal Ford, a driver who was caught early on in the woes of today's race start, now finds his way back up to 16th with a chance potentially down the line here if further issues confound the number 6 for there to possibly be a charge back up to the top 15. We'll have to wait and see whether or not that materializes in favor of the 484. At the moment then, the 119 continues to lead ahead of the number 30, with Timo de Tosto securing away the bid of a podium for McLaren at the end of this season, ahead of Vincent Simard in 4th, Byron Forrest in 5th place, Kevin Quain in 6th with Graham Green 7th, Chili Peppers 8th and the Jackal in 9th, rounding out the top 10 then on what looks to be a solid result for the number 91 so far is Ivan Sanchez of Honkianos Motorsports. He's ahead of Andrew Veldkamp in 11th, Richard Cecil in 12th place, Didier Potvin in 13th, and Brandon Carr in 14th. Clinton Bourne in 15th, with Cal Ford 16th, Casey Miles 17th, Wishful Winnings in 18th, Christophe Dupois in 19th. So you see there what appears to be an exchange of position between the two. Momentarily was in Dupois' hands to fight for 18th. And then rounding out the top 20 is Stephen Black. One disconnect then of this 21 car grid. That was Dylan Vekere, reluctantly so for the 161, was looking to have a very solid race in today. Unfortunate timing on that disconnect. But ultimately that's not something the drivers themselves can control. In terms of nearest fights for position, telemetry would have us believe we're potentially to see one for 13th here. Potvin v Carr for 13th on the field. It's also worth pointing out Cecil to Veldkamp is a quickly narrowing margin. So looking back on board with the Aston Martin, the number 5 here with Richard Cecil, you can see only 8 tenths in front of him is Andrew Veldkamp. So we're going to stay on board with the Aston on what looks to be the build-up into the next fight on circuit. This winding middle to final. You see a bit of a wobble there for the number 616, so the chances becoming plentiful for Cecil. You can see the 616 is actually holding things around the outside. He's not looking to fight the Aston Martin. Down towards turn 13. That's Cecil up in front of him. Now up to 11th, then goes the number 5. Running things through at turn 14, now down to turn 15. The fight for 11th ended as quickly as it started. There appears to be further issues for the 616 than we previously led on to believe there. So much so that even Andrew Veldkamp himself thought it's not worth the squeeze to continue to fight the number 5 at this time. Meanwhile, behind, Didier Potvin has got his hands full here with the approach of both Carr and Bourne in contention for 13th. Presently then defending position. We look over the rear view to see the physical distance demonstrated between himself and the Mercedes. Half a second on the data between himself and Brandon Carr in the 888 Mercedes. Center mass of your screens at the moment. Getting closer and closer under the brakes here. We also see emerging in the background, looking for even more of a fight, the number 6 of Clinton Bourne. Out through turn 7. And see in the rear view mirror just how close that Mercedes is. And that view only gets better when we take a look over the rear spoiler. See there from ACR Anthony in chat, watching the last 2 rounds has had him hyped for the last 4 next week, even when season 3 kicks off, as he's looking to bring the McLaren back out. So that's a heavy indicator then to us, of course, the return of a driver we've seen before in this series. Anthony Valorio was the first ever driver outside of Christian LeBay to take a race win. And that was on both tenures of Season 1's run of Watkins Glen's double sprint. He did so with McLaren. Became the first ever driver to win for McLaren in this championship. It's going to be exciting then, of course, with how well things went for Badiali this season. If all 3 of those drivers are to find themselves present factors on Season 3's grid, it's going to make for a very exciting 3rd season going. Of course, with the new event regulations, we'll get into that topic in a moment's time when we get the opportunity in the last 10 minutes or so, just taking a look towards the road ahead. But as we see here between these 3, down the back straight, We'll look to catch on board here. We've been watching with a defending angle, but now as it's become somewhat of a larger concertina, we're going to get on board with the number 6. So searching here for the number 6. This is Clinton Bourne, but as we were scrolling across, we just happened upon here the ongoing fight for 6th. Kevin Quain versus Graham Green. Graham Green has been on a real late state burner here in the number 747, making up very sizable ground to Kevin Quain, well within his chances to put that 747 on the 3rd row by the end of this race. But we'll wait for that in a moment's time, as we've seen up and around the outside the number 6. Could that be 2 positions for the price of 1, as he's up the inside on Didier Potvin? And it absolutely is. We see the trailing end of a double overtake by Clinton Bourne out through turn 13, now through turn 15. And that is sensational stuff there. Went for the attack around the outside at turn 13. Then at turn 14 was up on the inside. No, sorry, not up on the inside. Up on the outside, I should say. The 35. And secured that double run of positions in the span of only 2, maybe 3 corners at a push there. That was very, very smooth from the number 6. Looking on board then with the 747. As we fall into the last 9.5 minutes of racing, so taking a look at the preceding order of things, we still see it's business as usual on that podium. Labay, Tanguay and Di Tosto. And further behind, Simard and Forrest in the top 5. Quain and Green looking to fight here for 6th place. Meanwhile, Peppers, 8th, Jackalknife and Sanchez still in the top 10. It's also worth pointing out here, very close fight between Dupois and Winnings. We catch them right in the trailing end of it, down towards turn 1. Dupois running things long through turn 1 to hold on to 18th place. Wishful Winnings 19th on the field so far. You can see here vigorously attacking up the inside through turn 4 into turn 5 we go. By the looks of it, holds on a position there. Out through turn 5 is a little bit wide there in the inside on turn 6. You can still see though from the inside he holds ample ground up over the 39, but you can see he's really having to rag the car around the corners, and it's for that reason the smoother line is rewarding Christophe Dupois with his opportunity to fight once again with Wishful Winnings. It's much more jagged, the drive we're seeing here from the number 233. Meanwhile, just taking a look in here, Veldkamp v Bourne, as things continue to hot up in their fight for 12th place. We saw earlier on his double overtake on Carr and Potvin. Could be yet another position to find under his belt in a moment's time here, as we can see Clinton Bourne shows absolutely no signs of slowing down. The number 6 on his run in towards turn 8 is looking further up on the inside there on the number 616, but Veldkamp holds his nerve. The question is, can he hold position on the run through turn 9 and 10? The number 6 trying to go up and around the outside, then to the inside, and then to the outside again. Can he tuck back in over the racing line? Not quite yet. Around the outside once again, holding his nerve there. It's Iron Will from the number 6. Clinton Bourne up and around the outside the long way around in towards 12th place. I mean, he has been on absolute fire in the sort of last 20 minutes or so of racing here. He's had his real ups and downs, but you can knock him down, but he gets right back up. And it's this phenomenal commitment that keeps him in that fight. It's just raw willpower out of that number 6. A double overtake a few laps ago, and then just all the way long up and around the outside over the number 616. It is phenomenal stuff we're seeing from Bourne this late into the race. Meanwhile, looks to be trouble here. Simard now up and ahead of Byron Forrest, so it appears. These two looking to exchange positions here. The 824, well within its chances. We see about 7/10 away from Simard. There was a brief exchange where Forrest was up in 4th. This could be a curious one to watch. Let's go and catch on board with the Aston Martin. in the attacking of 2. On board then with Byron Forrest, you can see clear line of sight over the 120. Faster in the last lap by a second and a tenth. Presently, something appears to be awry in that number 120 up in front to have dropped this far back so quickly. You can see it's struggling through the corners, so something is not chained together as it should be on that 120. For the 824, this is the best opportunity he's got here for a chance at a second row finish. 5.5 minutes to the checkered flag. Meanwhile, it looks like even more trouble. 2 yellow flags out, one in sector 3, the other in the trailing end of sector 2. Getting a look here, the 35 involved, as well as the 616, and by the looks of it, the 888 as well, but mostly the 35 in jeopardy, that being Didier Potvin. He had another incident to report on as well, but I believe it's since resolved itself, so we're back into green flag conditions as we stay on board with Byron Forrest in the trailing end of Season 2, Round 8. Worth noting that things are starting to open up for Simard. Whether or not it was just a dodgy last couple of laps, and now it's been rectified for one last push to the checkered flag here. Meanwhile, we see now the yellow flags emerge for the number 6 out of turns 2 and 3. Clinton Bourne in even more trouble, so it appears, after what was a phenomenal drive 4th. Where does he now find himself, being the real question? As it stands, I think it was just a bit of a fluke for him in Sector 1, and he still holds on to 12th place. We'll see what the update on that says a little later on. See almost these micro corrections up in front. You can see it in the way the car's pitching in through turn 6, wrestling with the diff. The 120 is definitely showing some signs of struggle here, but Simard is firming it, is trying to open the gap up whichever way he can over the 824. Both of these drivers, of course, struggling now on their tires this late into the race. Things looked for a good time there. A lot more dramatic in difference for the 120. I believe we are on the penultimate lap for the majority of drivers here. We do see, though, for Byron Forrest, took a little bit of grass over his right hand side, and that slowed him down drastically here to the point where the gap between himself and Simard is now 1.5 seconds. That brings a premature end to the fight of 4th, but not entirely to his chances of 4th place. With still some cards left on the table, things could change at a moment's notice between these two, so we'll be keeping an eye on that situation before the end of this race. Now looking on with the situation for Veldkamp, fighting with Carr at this time. This is for 13th on the field. Brandon Carr sizing his chances up in towards turn 7. Could he aim for a switch back onto the back straight here on the 616? The 616 with more momentum holds on to 13th. As we are about to cross into the point of no return from the point of view of the 119, so not long from now will we be getting on board with Christian Lebay. The 233 brings out the yellow flags once again. We see here from Christophe Dupois' point of view, it was wishful winnings that did so. These two running into serious trouble there, as you saw a big step out of oversteer in the dirty air for the number 39 of Dupois. In the background, you can see the 119 crossing the line to start that final lap. Meanwhile, Dupois later onto the brakes of 2, but runs himself out of ground at turn 1, allowing Winnings a much easier run of ground. Meanwhile, Richard Cecil, we see just weaving his way between the pair. 11th on the field. It's been a great turnaround of things for the number 5. Getting a look with some of the last kindlings of fighting out on track at the moment. We've seen plenty of different fights emerge. For Clinton Bourne, well, it's been quite the emotional roller coaster, I think, coming away from this with 9 positions up from whence he started and a whole myriad of fantastic fights. Is definitely one way to remember Season 2. It was a rocky road here for the number 6, but often rocky road can be somewhat sweet for some. Nonetheless, then, we'll be catching on board in a moment's time here with the 119 as we scroll across to see sliding, so it appears, through Sector 3, the 119 of Christian LeBay. Is this a touch of showboating, or was that purely by coincidence when we caught on with the 119? Behind him there, Winnings v Dupois continues to rage on. Bear in mind, this will be decided from the arrival of the 119, so as it appears there for Winnings, with Dupois now looking for the inside. Bear in mind, we're on board with LeBay, but he's got front row tickets then to a fight he's about to decide with his arrival to the checkered flag here. 4 race wins in a row to kick off the end of Season 2. Down to the line then, LeBay wins in Indianapolis, and so does it decide the fight there for Winnings v Dupois. 18th for Winnings, 19th for Dupois. Also decides the fate then for Clinton Bourne. Valiant fight there, 9 positions up from where he started. A whole series of ups and downs there for the number 6, but brilliant fighting throughout. David Tanguay, 2nd. Timo de Tosto to the line then with McLaren for 3rd at the end of the season. A great hustle there from the 58. Vincent Simard, 4th place as he approaches the line. And there we see as well in the top 5, Byron Forrest, a fantastic drive for Aston Martin this season. A gamble absolutely worth taking. When we spoke with him last season about that move, this has definitely been a season to remember here for the 824, despite the various ups and downs that he and many drivers have experienced over the course of the season. That does not detract from what has been a brilliant drive today at the end of Season 2 for the Aston Martin number 824. Meanwhile, number 607, Kevin Quain 6th, Graham Green 7th, Chili Peppers 8th, the Jackal approaching the line for 9th. And Ivan Sanchez in another top 10 appearance, his 2nd this season. His previous top 10 appearance was in one of the double sprint races a few rounds ago, where in which he claimed 7th place at the end of the Circuit of the Americas doubleheader. You see here Sanchez to the line from 10th, then approaching the line, Richard Cecil. What was a less than ideal start to his race has turned around to be a grand end to his run of things here in Season 2. Number 5 approaches the line 11th. And, hang on a tick there. We saw just before the final results confirmed, Byron Forrest was technically disqualified for driving in the wrong direction. Now, you and I both know that he finished in 5th place. We saw that. And whether or not, I think that was just a case where he was showboating in the car. History will have it so that he finished in 5th place there. I'm not sure why he would be disqualified then. Nonetheless, LeBay wins in Indianapolis. The results are a little bit skewed now. So we'll wait for SimGrid to confirm absolutely all of that. And before we wrap things up then, a few notable articles of a conversation, namely is going to be, of course, the topic of Season 3. Here is the calendar, of course, once again, as we showed earlier on in the stream. 9 rounds over the traditional 8 we've had in the last 2 seasons. So coming up next week is the beginning of the longest season so far for the GT4 Pro-Am Cup America Series, kicking off in Brands Hatch on March 3rd. That'll be March 4th at 1 AM Greenwich Mean Time for our British viewers. That'll be starting things off on the Standard 60 format. Of course, the return of both Standard 60 and Double Sprint 30, but also the introduction as well, worth noting, of taking a look away from our current session regs. The look at the new regs coming up is the new event type, the Enduro. That'll be a 90-minute race coming up, as well as the new event type is the introduction of a solidified Pro and Am division standings, as well as the Teams Championship. So it's going to be curious to see how all of this unfolds over the course of the next 9 weeks to follow on from today. So taking a look from the conversation of the calendar, a few drivers then to get in touch with for the panel. Now, of course, we were given confirmation ahead of time that sadly we won't be able to have a chat with Kevin Quain, so that does still leave us with a few options here, so do just bear with us whilst we contact a few drivers and get the interview panel. So we'll be having a chat then, as it stands, with so it's going to be Richard Cecil, Dylan Vekere and Christian LeBay, so it appears. So we'll be getting in touch with them in just a moment's time. So we'll start things off by trying to get in touch here with Richard Cecil. Do give us just a moment. Okay, just an update. We're having some technical issues trying to reach out to Richard Cecil. So we'll... Oh, hang on just one moment. Well, good evening then, Richard Cecil. It's Regan from TRTN. How are you feeling then at the end of this season? Obviously, your second and full season in now with Aston Martin since the move away from Alpine. Obviously, a decision worth making. It's been a very solid comeback drive today. How are you feeling now at the end of season 2?
The season was wonderful. I can't say enough about the commentary, obviously. But yeah, I'm really glad that I switched over to the Aston Martin. The Alpine's a fun little car, but it just can't keep up with these big V8s.
And how are you feeling on the road ahead in towards what is now going to be the longest season on record? 9 rounds over the previous 8 in the last 2 seasons, coming up into season 3.
I'm very excited about that. Looking to switch over to the Porsche for that, I believe.
Ooh, okay. I mean, this is, you heard it here first, folks. That is quite big news. Of course, we know of your affinity for the Porsches. You've been racing Porsches both on and off the virtual space for many, many years, so I've heard.
That's correct. I raced in real life for about 20 years in a Porsche 911 air-cooled 1988 version. Just recently sold it, preparing to retire. And I have to say, the online racing, particularly with the commentary, is really a nice segue for me to still get the same thrills and excitement and preparation and all of that in order to get the same feeling that I used to get when I was on the track without any of the danger or the cost.
Well, this is going to be very exciting to see what you can do sort of in your element, as it were, with a lot of experience with Porsche, to see you move in with the 718 next season. That is going to make for quite an exciting performance. We've seen Porsche to be a pretty decent manufacturer on the field. It's just somewhat that was underexplored this season. We had a few sprinklings of it back in season 1 with drivers like Forrest were behind the wheel, and we had a bit of a good showcase there, but I think this is going to be quite curious to see what it can do in your hands.
Yeah, I'm excited about that too. I think I was kind of scared away from it by Byron initially. I think that's why I chose to go with the Aston Martin. I felt like it was a good, stable platform, but Byron has kind of whetted my appetite to get back into the Porsche again, so I think I'll give him a run for his money next season.
Well, I look forward to seeing that. Well, enjoy what's been of this season. It's been a fantastic performance from you throughout, consistent as always. They're fighting back the odds every step of the way. Solid position inside of the top 10 at the end of the standings for season 2. So onwards and upwards for season 3 for you then.
Thank you so much, Regan. It's been a pleasure.
My pleasure. Take care.
Bye.
Well, that was Richard Cecil and the number 5 Aston Martin. You heard it here first then. A move to Porsche for Season 3. This is going to be an exciting one to see on the run-in towards next week's first round at Brands Hatch. Next, we're going to try and get a word in with one of the rising talents of Season 2. If they're available for a word here, that'll be from Dylan Vekere. We'll just quickly try to locate them here. Bear in mind, it's not an exact science as to whether or not we're able to reach out to everyone, such as the somewhat temperamental nature of the technology we use. Do just bear with us. Okay, as it appears, there may have been some issues trying to communicate with Vekere. We've been told, though, that Byron Forrest is willing to stand in for an interview, so we'll quickly get in touch then with the 824. It'd be quite interesting to see what his thoughts have been now on his first full season in with Aston Martin. Hi there, Byron. It's Regan from TRTN. How are you feeling then after your first full season in with Aston Martin? Of course, we had the opportunity to speak with you a few months back, I believe it were now. And there was obviously the announcement then of your move to Aston Martin. How are you feeling now after a full season?
Man, so after a full season with this Aston, man, the V8, I was getting swallowed up by the V8s last season in that Porsche. But it got good straight line speed and it handles decent, but it's a little sluggish. Then I also had some technical issues. So being that ACC, mine had a 0 dead on my throttle and brake. So I hadn't been getting full throttle like ever since I've been on ACC. So really these past 2 races were my first races with having full throttle.
Oh, so it's been a bit of a curious story then, wrestling with hardware problems. But I think what we've definitely been able to see of you in the last 2 races across, was it Snetterton now and from today, is definitely a step in that right direction. I did feel like something was not 100% there, and now we know obviously why that is because the hardware wasn't playing up to scratch. But now that obviously we've seen what you've been able to do, top 5 result to bring you to the end of the season there with a very high note, bringing us up into season 3. I think things could definitely look a lot more onwards and upwards for you coming into this season now that a lot of the creases have been ironed out. Would you agree?
Yeah, definitely. Next season, right now, I'm registered in the Camaro, but it's still up in the air. Who knows? I may switch before the season start. I may go back to the Porsche.
Okay.
I had a lot of fun driving that car, man.
Okay, well, I mean, this is, again, on another series of firsts. We obviously spoke just earlier on with Richard Cecil there, in which he announced he'd be moving to Porsche. And this could very well be the same case. Of course, we'll come to see whether or not that's the truth when we head into Brands Hatch next week. But, for those of you listening in on the Twitch chat at the moment, that could be another one here. You may have heard it here first of a move to Chevrolet for Byron Forrest.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Looking forward to it.
Oh, look forward to seeing you there. It's been a fantastic season for you, and definitely a lot learned there with Aston Martin and potentially future endeavours with Chevrolet. Do look forward to that. And till then, it's been great speaking with you again. Of course, had that chat with you not too long ago when you announced you'd be moving to Aston. So this could be yet another step in that saga. Do look forward to seeing where that goes.
Cool. Look forward to seeing you next season.
All the best. Take care.
All right, you too.
And so that was Byron Forrest. You may have very well heard it here first, then a move potentially to Chevrolet. This could be an exciting one coming up into Season 3. A whole new swarm of changes coming in. Oh, hang on just a moment here. Obviously, we've been on the menus for just long enough to where the sort of screen's dimmed out there for our feed. That wasn't a glitch on your end. That was on our end. So, getting a look in with our last interview of today, of course, on with Season 2's champion, returning from his championship win last season. We look to get on board with the 119, as we just saw celebrations there from the 233 of Wishful Winnings upon his first few races here on the Competizione Performance League. Let's get a word then out of its champion here for Season 2, on with Christian Lebay. Hello again then, Christian. Odd for us to keep meeting like this then, isn't it then? Of course, Season 2 champion. Back-to-back championship wins in the GT4 Pro-Am Cup. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling good, It's been a hard season to guys start to put more pressure at the front, so I need to keep it up and practice and be ready for each race.
A lot of big moves coming from around the grid. Any of those moves you may have heard recently had you worried?
What you mean about big move? A car, guys, going to move from a car to another car or what?
Yeah. So what we've heard recently, Richard Cecil's moving over to Porsche. There's very likely the chance that Forrest could be moving over to Chevrolet. Any of those sound interesting to you?
Yeah, for sure. I know that Cecil is a Porsche guy because in real life he's driving the Porsche in the past a lot on the racetrack I think in Israel, something like this in US. And I think he's going for the big buck, the big V8, the big beast on track. So let's see if we can make it, compared to the Aston Martin. But should be very similar, I think. And I think he will really love that car. A lot of oversteer on that car. Some driver said that they have no steering. That car understeer too much. But with good preparation, you can make it oversteer a lot, and it's really a good car.
I'll be looking forward to seeing how you defend what is now back-to-back championships in this series. Two-time champion on the run in towards Season 3 next week at Brands Hatch. How are you feeling for the road ahead?
It's going to be very special because I know it's not a long break. It's only one. So, but a lot of guys like to race in that GT4 series. And as of today, you can see that the attendance is very good. I'm really, really happy that everyone's still there until the end. And 20 cars on the grid for the last round. Be surprised, and CPL is really, really happy about the driver who compete in it.
Well, looking forward to seeing where this next chapter goes. Of course, new regulations coming in for the next season, new event types, and 9 rounds over the original 8. So longest season running coming up next for the GT4 Pro-Am Cup America Series. I imagine then it's right in saying you feel up to the task to go 3 on the trot, then potentially 3 championships. when we next speak to you?
Oh, it's gonna be hard. It's gonna be hard because a lot of guy at the back, like I told earlier, to put pressure a lot and more on me. And today, when I saw the Tosto time during the quali, Tanguay, and of course Vickery too, Forest, I don't think, and or two, under 310 or something like this, it's pretty close to me. So to feeling more stressed than before, and I know that Badiali is pretty fast. So I think that's gonna be a very intense season 3. It's gonna kick to another level.
Well, look forward to it. Until then, enjoy what's been of this championship. Of course, 2-time champion now. And let's see where the road goes for season 3.
Perfect. Congrats to everyone, and thank you, Sir Clark, for good work with us. Really appreciate, I think, for everyone.
Yeah, my pleasure. It's been quite a wild ride, so let's see where the road goes ahead. And until then, take care.
Perfect. Thank you. Bye.
So that was your Season 2 champion. Back-to-back championships then for Christian LeBay. It seems that the road may not be so clear for the run into Season 3. Definitely up in the air as to who could fight this one out over the course of the next 9 weeks. Coming, of course, to bring back up what that calendar is going to look like here. You can see these times currently... the dates are dependent on the Eastern Standard Time. So if you're tuning in from the UK on Greenwich Mean Time, just add an additional day to all of these. So instead of March 3rd, it'll be March 4th at 1 a.m., March 11th at 1 a.m., March 18th at 1 a.m., so on and so forth for when we go live. It has been quite the bizarre ride then here in Season 2. A fantastic follow-up to what was a great season back in Season 1. New regs on the way, new event types on the way, and more rounds to follow here in the Competizione Performance League GT4 Pro-Am Cup America Series, brought to you by Malwar Transport and a Shoe Action Transport Expert, and live exclusively on TRTN. As always, I've been Regan Clark. That's all from us here. Take care and good night.